The Stanley Cup final is set. It starts on Wednesday, June 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to feature the Tampa Bay Lightning for the third time in a row, and the Colorado Avalanche, the team that came into the season as the Cup favorite. The Avalanche are minus 175 to win the series. Lightning coming back plus 150. The game one line reads as follows. At this time, we are recording on Sunday night, so this obviously can change, as both lines can change. But the Bolts are plus 140 on the road. Avalanche minus 160. The over-under here is 6. Tampa Bay's coming off a 6-game victory over the Rangers. They won 4-2. They won 4 games in a row after going down 2-0. They were down 2-0 in game 3 as well. So a really astounding comeback from the Lightning. They're still the champs until they're finally put to rest. And the Avalanche are coming off. They've won 4 in a row as well. They've actually won 6 in a row after sweeping the Edmonton Oilers in the Western Conference Final. Let's just quickly look at the series line here. Over the course of the postseason, we've talked about the Lightning, right? Like this is a team that can beat you in a number of different ways. And that's incredibly important against this Avalanche team, because they just showed in that Oilers series that they don't really have a problem if the game gets gummed up either. So I think we're going to see 2 teams that are going to, especially in game 1, maybe sit back, download information, and try to have a feeling out process, a feeling out game 1, because both teams are going to be confident that they can come back and win the series as well if they lose game 1. I think, though, from just looking at the series line, if I had to pick, and I actually kind of do like the price, I like the Lightning here. They're plus 150. They've shown that they can just absorb pressure. They did a great job against a Maple Leafs team that's really good at 5-on-5, has a ton of offensive upside. They did the same thing against the Florida Panthers, a team that scored more goals than any team in the salary cap era in a regular season. And then against the Rangers, they took on a counter-attacking team, and they kind of snuffed them out too. So just defensively and goaltending-wise, the Lightning are in great form. And that's why I think that in a series, the series line should be a little bit closer than what it's sitting at right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I love these kind of series because it's absolute chaos. There's so many things that we need to unpack with this series, and there's so many things that are just unknown, right? So firstly, if you think about it, we have the rust versus rest element here again. So I think it's safe to say that the market has now picked up on the quote rested team in the playoffs has a tougher time historically getting back up to the required level of play. For Tampa Bay, we saw them not skip a beat through the Toronto series into the Florida series, but had a tougher time finding their game early in the Rangers series after a longer layoff from the Florida sweep. For Colorado, they played very well in game 1 of the St. Louis series after the Nashville sweep. The game did go into overtime after the Avs, they couldn't put the Blues away. So now they have a long layoff going into the Tampa Bay series after the Oilers sweep. So like usual, if you're looking at this angle, the question is, how do you quantify it? So one way that I was looking at is to compare the series line with the game 1 line. We see that Tampa Bay has been discounted off the series line, which indicates to me that any rest advantage that Tampa Bay has already been priced into the number. So that's the first thing, right? The second thing that I've been looking at in this series is Andrei Vasilevsky's starts to the series. So we saw him get off to a tough start against Toronto, and kind of work his way into the series. He was on his game for the whole Florida series. Then we saw him work into the Rangers series. We know that Tampa Bay has a goaltending edge here, but I mean, which Vasilevsky do we see early in the series? I would argue that any concerns with Vasilevsky would be mitigated by the inconsistency we see out of Kemper. So if the angle is Vasilevsky's form, you can't ignore what you'll get out of the Avalanche goaltending. So these are just a couple of things. There's a lot more that we'll get into here, but I mean, I just love this chaos. Like it's going to be awesome. Like going through this series game by game.
Yeah, it's a series, a Stanley Cup final that it might not have two great markets in terms of, there's not a team from Toronto or New York or whatever, but if you asked, a focus group of thousands of NHL like diehard hockey fans about this being the Stanley Cup final, I think you'd get like a 99% approval rating. This is what we want to see. Like, you're looking at a 2-time defending champ against the team that is supposed to be coming for that title, the team that everyone has been talking about on the ascendancy for so long, and they finally got through that second round to get that monkey off their back and have played incredibly well. Like, they've played like the Stanley Cup champions, or excuse me, like the Stanley Cup favorites, basically the entire season. And now they have a chance to unseat the 2-time defending champs, who of course are going for, a three-peat, the first three-peat we'd seen, we would have seen since the Islanders of the early 80s. So for the goaltending standpoint, I think the general consensus about the series is the Avalanche overall are the better team, one through 20, but the edges that Tampa Bay have are probably in maybe the most important parts of the game, which is why I think this is a little bit closer to a coin flip than the odds suggest. And like you said, with the rust versus rest factor, we don't have as many questions about Tampa Bay's form as we do just about how Colorado will react to not only stepping up into the moment, which is this is their first Stanley Cup final for this group, whereas this is the third straight for Tampa Bay. So I just think there's enough question marks that you can easily see the Lightning taking game one with Vasilevsky in form. We don't know what we'll see from Kemper. I mean, we know we can assume that Kemper is going to start game one, but that hasn't even been confirmed, which should tell you everything you need to know about the Avalanche goaltending situation, because Pablo Franco, he started to come undone a little bit towards the end of that Oilers series, especially in that crazy final game. And Kemper was his backup, so he was obviously healthy enough to play. Yeah. So assuming we get Kemper, that's going to be his first game since early on in that Oilers series. Exactly. So his layoff is even longer. So there's enough edges here for Tampa Bay that we can be, I think you can make an argument to be bullish on them. And I also like the fact that John Cooper is just a master at getting the matchups he wants. And the Lightning have a true shutdown line, right? Like that Killorn, Hagel, Cirelli line was a monster against the Rangers. And of course, going up against Nathan McKinnon is a different animal compared to, Mika Zibanejad, who's a great player in his own right. But they just have the horses to do whatever it takes to slow him down and turn this series into a battle between the depth. And if that happens, then the Nazem Kadri injury becomes a big issue, right? So
especially in the road games, yeah.
Exactly. And by the time, we don't know when Kadri will enter the series, same thing with Braden Point, but it looks like Braden Point at least is like closer. And his injury timeline is more conducive to him having an impact than Kadri's. So there just are enough signals here pointing to the Lightning for me to get involved.
Yeah, I'm a little bit torn. I do like Colorado a little bit better. I think that I'm on the fence. The best thing for me in this series, I mean, I look at both of these teams like this, is just how incredibly versatile they are. We've seen Colorado run it up against an inferior Nashville team. Then we saw them pull out tight games against the Blues. Then we saw them win two shootouts against Edmonton and 2 tighter games as well. So Colorado, I think that Colorado has shown a little bit more versatility to me, but they're also stepping up in their goaltending matchup as well, right? There's a big difference going from Ingram to Husso to Mike Smith and hello Vasilevsky, right? So and meanwhile Tampa Bay is clearly stepping down against Kemper. So while I'm a little bit higher on Colorado in that they've shown me a little bit more, I have a lot of reservation based on the goaltending. And when you talk about versatility, it's not like Tampa Bay hasn't shown it, right? Like they've played tighter games for the most part, including choking out the Rangers on 5-on-5. But you have to look at the goaltending for additional context and who Tampa Bay has faced in getting here as well. So that's another element where you add more chaos into the mix. So I think overall, if Kadri is back before Point is, I think that that's like the depth that he'll provide Colorado, in my opinion, will be just enough to push them over the top.
Another step up in class for Colorado too is look at the defense corps that they've gone up against, right? Like, sure, Roman Josi is a great player, but after him, the Predators' blue line is pretty thin. And you look at the Blues, like the Blues are incredibly deep up front, and that's why we like the Blues a lot. And Binnington was in decent form in that series as well in goal, but they were banged up, like Nick Leddy, Torrey Krug, Scandella. A lot of these guys weren't able to play the full series against the Avalanche. And then you go to the Oilers, and for all the Oilers, the reasons that you especially love the Oilers, a deep defense isn't one of them, right? Like Darnell Nurse was playing at like 60%, he said. Then it was Duncan Keith, Tyson Barrie, like Evan Bouchard is on his way to becoming a great defenseman, but it's his second year in the league. Now the Avalanche are going to be going up against Victor Hedman, Ryan McDonough, and Eric Chernak. I think Eric Chernak was the best player in the series against the Rangers, outside of Shesterkin. He was a monster, and he's just able to. Him and McDonough are just able to handle those incredibly difficult minutes, and that frees up Hedman to kind of do his thing against maybe a little bit of a softer matchup. And then the third pair, which was with Zach Bogosian and Mikhail Sergachev, like Bogosian was really good in that Rangers series, and Sergachev's he could be a top pair defenseman on 15 teams in the league. So no matter who you're going to be seeing on that blue line with the Lightning, it's not easy. And none of their forward lines are really a weak point either. Nick Paul, you go down the spine, right? Stamkos, that top line, if you want to match up against top line versus top line, you give the edge to Colorado, sure, but both lines will still be dangerous. You're going to try to do everything you can to avoid the Cirelli line, because they've shown that they can shut down the Matthews Marner line, and they then to the Zibanejad and to the Panthers, and they'll have a chance to do it against McKinnon, so they'll try to avoid that. And then the third line, Nick Paul is a great two-way center, and Ross Colton's a good defensive, two-way winger. So it's like, it's pick your poison. I think just no matter what the Avalanche do, those edges that they have against basically every team in the NHL, and they have them against Tampa Bay, they just become muted. And Tampa should, with that, be able to turn this into a rock fight and a coin flip, however you want to say it. And at these prices that you're going to get, that's all you're asking.
Yeah, and just and just jumping on what you're saying, like that's exactly the reason why I think that Colorado, they have to make this a high variance series, whereas Tampa Bay, you whenever you watch Tampa Bay play, you kind of get that like calming sense, right? Like you go up and down that lineup, like I feel calm watching them play, right?
It's like ASMR.
Like they know exactly what to do. Even when you zoom out and kind of look at them in terms of how they play the series, right? Like we've touched on this. Tampa Bay has shown that they are willing to feel out their opponents early in series, and they have no qualms even going down in series as well before making the appropriate adjustments. The only problem I see with that, though, strategy against Colorado is that they may run out of time. So they were so close to running out of time against the Rangers when they were down 0-2 and then trailing the Rangers 2-0 in game 3. And I mean, obviously, clearly the Avalanche are at another level compared to Toronto, Florida, and the Rangers. So I am interested to see how Tampa Bay starts this series, and if they do employ their kind of feeling out process, how quickly they can make their adjustments, and if it will be in time for Braden Point's return. So that's another thing we have to keep an eye on. He's not going to play game 1, but they do seem to be confident that he is going to return at some point of this in this series.